Good evening. My name is Ajuri Engelale, and you are most welcome to this inaugural edition of Africa's Future Leaders. The average age of the 10 oldest African leaders is 78.5, compared to an average of 52 years old for the world's 10 most developed economies. And when juxtaposed with other continents, Africa has a very small proportion of younger leaders between the ages of 35 and 55. However, the tragic irony is that the African continent boasts the youngest population in the world, with a median age of 19.5 years of age, according to the United Nations. If the numbers tell the story, then we can surmise that the qualities of youthful leadership manifest in enhanced development, which brings us to the central premise of this program, Africa's Future Leaders. Who are they? How can they be identified? We seek to identify young African leaders who are impacting their societies in tangible ways, right where they are. Across the continent, you may or may not see them, but they are there. Most often with little resources and in the face of adversity, these young African leaders work tirelessly for the good of others. They never sought recognition, but it found them. Over the course of this series, we bring you the stories profiling a new generation of African leadership, selfless, sincere, and driven by altruistic purpose to build a better Africa for posterity. These young leaders have chosen to answer the call of a diverse people and a blessed continent, and prove beyond doubt that it is not about how much money you have or titles and certificates, nor is it about who you know, what God you worship, or where you come from. It's about what is in your heart. With right intent and a diligent hand, you too can lead through service, and we hope to find you. Africa needs you. This is Africa's Future Leaders. It is our privilege to take you to Nairobi, Kenya, where the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI, held its Eastern Regional Conference, bringing together several young African leaders of thought and industry from East and Central Africa. We had a rare opportunity to sit down with a select group of distinguished young leaders to better understand the challenges confronting them in their various nations of influence and the solutions they are implementing to bring about development where they are. With me are 7 distinguished young leaders from across the East African sub-region in the continent, and they are here to answer our questions concerning a very important issue, one that has been on the minds of all of us during this conference, and that issue is leadership. And I want to start with our young fellow from Kenya. I had the privilege yesterday to listen to the speech you gave concerning your journey. And one of the things that struck me was a moment when you said that it is your goal to answer the question which you asked yourself, which is, would I follow me? Can you elaborate on that concept for us?
I realized that most of the time when I thought about leadership, I thought about what I could do. But then I realized that it's also important to think about my followers and whether what the decisions I'm making are good for my followers. And so now I intend to approach leadership from the aspect of my followers and whether they are comfortable with my decisions.
We're here with a YALI fellow who has worked quite a bit with young people in Congo, Brazzaville. What has been your experience? You know, given the peculiarities of your immediate environment, what tools have you taken from the program that you can now apply moving forward?
I was addressing the issue of unemployment and also student internship placement, because it was a challenge for them to have those opportunities. And they couldn't also graduate. So what I was doing is I was looking for those employment and an internship placement and helping them graduate, and why not secure a job. And when I joined the Mandela Washington Fellowship, I came to realize that there were more things to do in terms of creating a bigger impact. So what I did was I was in contact with some of the great people, great young leaders I met here from other regions, and I was sharing experiences, what they were doing back home, and how they were impacting the communities. And I came to realize that I can also do the same thing, like reach a broader community, not just students, but also orphans, dropouts, financially disadvantaged groups, because I am an orphan, so I know what it's like to grow up without a male figure in the house. So I was raised by a single mom, so she sacrificed almost what she had, and so it was kind of challenging. So I say, okay, why not giving the same opportunities to others? So based on that, I say, okay, let me build on the platform I started and create the NGO to reach this goal. So the NGO that I've implemented is called the YA Club, the Youth Ambassador Club. It's a community-based club and a not-for-profit organization. So the idea is to facilitate education support, but at the same time encourage entrepreneurship.
As robust as your strategic plan of action is, what I find very intriguing about your account is how it all started. You talked about being fatherless, that you had an experience similar to that of an orphan, and how that shaped your view of the world and what ultimately you have done. Can you talk a little bit about whether or not you had that vision, this vision of what you're doing right now from an early age?
Earlier it was not burning, but now it's greater. Because the Mandela Washington Fellowship is about giving back to your community. So you learn cutting-edge tools. So I was in business and entrepreneurship track, and I say, okay, why not using my experience and everything that I've gathered so far to reach a larger community, especially orphans and dropout students, because they are more victims. If they lack an employment, they cannot secure a job, they don't have opportunities, so they are exposed. So they can do plenty of different things. So we have a phenomenon currently in our country we call the black babies, les bébés noirs. So it's a group of young people. They are stirring up troubles, creating violence and destroying people. So it's kind of hard to see a generation like that. So why not saving those who are not yet in those groups and helping them find a better future?
What's really interesting here is I see a common thread. Whether one is involved in entrepreneurship, whether one is involved in public service, advocacy, research, there's a common thread, and that's a fundamental level of education that's involved in order to lead. And that takes me to our next Yali Fellow, who has come into this program from the DRC. And one of the interesting things in a previous conversation I had with you was you mentioned that as the largest Francophone country in the entire world, there are many opportunities. But in your view, you said that it's education that is setting the country back and oppressing the possibilities, if you will, for the realization of potentials. Can you talk a little bit about how that has motivated you into your present journey?
I have quite an interesting journey myself. I started as an engineer because I felt like I was not really well oriented into the field, and almost half of my professional life have been fighting to kind of go back to my passion, that has been to help people. So when I was studying in South Africa, finishing my studies and starting to work as an engineer, going back home and trying to change the system, I was actually able to see how bad the education system was and how young people were not given the skills to be able to, get jobs, even get, involved in the country's management. If people are not equipped to be able to do anything, they will not be able to participate. So we have more than 60% of the population that is below 25, and that is a big number. And if they are uneducated, undereducated, the country is running at the risk of, not evolving. So we need to be able to give these people the opportunity to study, give these people the opportunity to expand their horizon, not just, study, but then give them the opportunity to evolve with the world, because the world is changing, the labor market is changing, skills are changing. We need to be able to adapt to that. So for me, reforming education, giving people the right type of education, giving people relevant skills is really what I fight for in the DRC.
We have a Yali fellow here on the panel from Burundi, and we know that it's said that democracy cannot function without an educated society. And we know that in Burundi there are some serious challenges confronting your democratic processes at the moment. Can you talk a little bit about how the peculiarities of your country have motivated you?
Burundi is a country that has never got 10 years of peace since the times of independence. The independence of Burundi was in 1962, and every day that we are there, when we see 9 years approaching, we expect a war to break out. And that's the situation now. You know what happened in 2015. But I'm also from a poor family, and maybe the poverty caused by the situation that's not promising. So born in a war, grew up in a war, and educated in a war with many challenges. And I managed to pay for my school fees. I was using a small camera to make pictures and sell the pictures. And I was serious with the business, and I made more money, and I trained others. And the money I was earning was helping other students in the campus, because the situation was hard that some students could even die because of poverty, because of malaria, and they didn't get money to buy tablets for malaria. And then after that, I thought about something I can do. Fortunately, I applied for Yali, and I was placed in a business and entrepreneurship at the University of Iowa. And coming back home, I had a business in mind to do, but the situation in Burundi couldn't allow me to do that. But I just tried to give back to the community and continue empowering youth in Burundi, though the situation was like that. And then I created the mentorship club in 6 institutions, mainly the universities. Actually, the mentorship club now is working in 6 universities. Why? It was as an intervention, because the problem we had, the wars we had, were because people were ignorant of what's happening, and then a politician told them, this ethnic is doing that, this is doing that, these people are bad, these people are bad. And some were promised something, like a job, like money to live on, and then they were swayed by the money they are given. So I saw that the problem will remain unless people get educated. That's why I just thought about the mentorship club as an intervention, and we are training them about business and entrepreneurship in the perspective that people will have their own money, their own business, give jobs, and with their own money it will be hard for people to incite them to violent actions. So I'm trying to leverage that problem through education. If we are 3 ethnic groups, and the rivals one are 2 Hutus and a Tutsis, but if they are together for the same purpose in one project, because of the education and entrepreneurial education I'm giving them, they want to get that time to fight against each other because of tribal conflicts, because we have the same objective of development.
One of the memories that I believe all of us as Africans on this stage right now would recall is the Rwandan genocide of 1994. And as an indication of what tribalism can lead to, I want to ask our Yali Fellow from Rwanda, who has had an opportunity to see his country move from instability, conflict, genocide into an era of peace and relative prosperity. I know you're focused in on the environment. Can you tell us a little bit about, given the background, if you will, of your country, what gaps you still see there that can be filled through new approaches learned in this program, and what you intend to do moving forward?
I'm 23 years old, and the reason why I'm saying my age right here is because I just want to say that I was born amidst the aftermath of the genocide that happened in Rwanda in 1994. So currently, we used to say that Rwanda is 24 years old, because actually when the genocide was happening, the country was entirely destroyed. So the rebuilding process started right after the genocide. So being born amid the crisis was like a call to action to everyone who was in the country, because we didn't have infrastructure at that time. Schools were destroyed. In fact, everything well destroyed. So growing up in such despair was not actually for me to remain in such despair, but rather for me to think about what I can do to help my society move forward. And luckily I got an opportunity to join the Mandela Washington Fellowship, where I actually got an opportunity to advance my business, which was actually to help my society solve the energy crisis, because that was like the least thing I can do to help my community. And it was challenging for me to implement this idea, because Rwanda is unique in a way such that we don't have too much resources. When you look at soil, the soil is acidic. When you look at the rivers, so you can build like anything you want for electricity or nuclear, anything. So we don't have those resources. But the only resources that Rwanda has is our people. And I'm one of those people. So I said, maybe we can find other means to make energy for the people instead of like staying in this kind of darkness. And then I ventured into starting a project which was actually to transform the waste, which was causing a problem, into renewable energy that people can use for cooking and everything, so that you can not also rely on the fact that we are coming from the darkness of the genocide and then go into, fossil fuels and other type of unfair energy sources, but rather to benefit from those little resources that we had in making renewable energy for ourselves, but also benefiting the entire world.
Many of us are familiar with the saying that if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And so we know that if we are talking about administrative process and we're talking about governance, it's absolutely essential that there's adequate research, because without research, how can we implement? And that takes me to our next Yali Fellow, who is very much at home here in Kenya. And I want to ask you, because you focused in on research and research strategies, and as relevant as that is becoming, kind of as Africa moves into a new frontier of development and peace, can you talk to us a little bit about what guided you in the direction of this specialization and what you hope to do with what you've learned?
I was busy making apps and different software solutions, but at the end of the day, I realized the solution I was giving the clients was information, was knowledge that they needed to do to transform their businesses or to grow their businesses or to make more profit. And that gave me, it pushed me to the direction of thinking, what's the importance of research in Africa? Why do we need research? Not just in the development sector, but in the corporate sector with the governments. And the Mandela Washington Fellowship, which I went for in 2014, gave me that opportunity, because with the fellowship I was able to meet people in the public management space and in the civic leadership space. And research was a key thing that was cutting across, that we need to know more about our environment, our context, not just the government, but I myself am in the development sector. If I'm working in education, what are the needs of the people I'm working with? How can I expand? Who can I work with to expand? But then traditionally research has been 50 pages of reading and only accessible through maybe government websites or accessible through other means. So you find the small organizations and the smaller communities now, because you see a trend in where communities are now eager to learn more about their context, because they need to communicate their context to donors or to government so that they could communicate their needs to them and their needs can be catered for. And that led me to now setting up a research firm, research with a touch of ICT. The reason why I emphasize on ICT and innovation in research is because it's about time we share data, it's about time we share our findings, and the best way to do it is to use the technology we have available to us. And the best way to do it is to communicate it in the simplest way possible to communities. I've worked with communities in the grassroots where they create their own data, and this data is used to complement national statistics, and which can be able to, even Africa-wide, if you think about it, if we work with communities to generate their own data that can be used to communicate the needs as they change, and this can be used for them to change the environment around them. So this was what really motivated me to start working with research, with data. And also the main key thing is, in the past, research has always used the respondents as specimen. We never really engage them and make them feel part of the research process. So I'm also keen on participatory approaches that has really improved the quality of data we get, because once you feel like you're part of the process, that's when you're able to tell the truth in a safe space, and that's when you have sustainability of research projects, because a research project should not just end at the end of a funding period. Communities should take it up and continue coordinating that data and continue improving the quality of data we have to better make decisions in the government level, the corporate level, and the development sector level.
One of the major ideologies that have been out there now for decades has been the notion that we're stronger together than we are apart. And that while regional integration is very important, that continental integration is a promising possibility. Some people are skeptical, some people believe. And one of the people who believe is seated here with us. From the home of PanAfricanism, the Black Star country of Ghana, the home of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, we welcome a Yali Fellow who works with the African Union. And I want to ask you about this notion of this idea of Pan-Africanism, and not just as an abstract idea, but I want to ask you, as somebody who's very well aware of the technical specifics involved in that idea, can you share with us why you believe that continental integration, that a Pan-African nation of states is possible?
On the eve of the first meeting of the African independent head of state, led by Kwame Nkrumah, the whole idea was to have a United States of Africa at that time. But there were forces that ought to be fought in order to be able to achieve that. As at that time, many of the countries were yet to achieve independence. So they redirected the focus and began to work on achieving independence for every African country. As I speak now, this has been achieved. Then, on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the Organization of African Unity, we realized that in as much as we are able to achieve independence, it's now important for us to achieve the economic freedom of our people, because we realize that poverty, hunger, disease, conflict, these are things that have characterized the continent lately. And to be able to forge on, to have one country, it was important to have these issues addressed. And one of the surest ways to have it addressed is to create an economic environment that allows every citizen of Africa to flourish. And so they created the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, which essentially seeks to provide a transformational space for the African. So if you look at it, that plan is really designed to have United States for Africa in the next 50 years, by 2063. Now, the question is whether it is realistic or achievable. Your guess is as good as mine. The debate continues. If you ask my personal view, I think that the leaders are taking the right steps at this moment to make it realizable. They've just created last year the African passport. The head of states of Africa have already been issued this passport. The hope is that very soon, every citizen of the continent will have the opportunity to apply and have the African passport. If this happens, you and I can have access to each other's country within the continent without the challenge we used to face. So for me, that's a big step. The next thing is the creation of the African free trade space, which allows each African to do business within the continent of Africa. And what it means is that will promote trade among ourselves. And that in itself will foster again about the continental unity. So you realize that over time, this vision is achievable. Of course, there are a lot of work that has to be done. Some of the countries are not stable at this moment. We hope and work hard to ensure that we achieve total stability in order to grow and develop.
Whether or not one agrees or disagrees with you on whether the United States of Africa, as it were, can be achieved, one thing all of us agree on is that unity is very important, both within our states and between our countries. And with that, I want to thank all of our Yali Fellows who are not just the ones on the stage, who were gracious enough to bless us with their insight, with their experience, with their presence, but also those who are not here. And I just want to say that what's common between everybody here is progress for Africa. Whether it's in ICT, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in education, whether it's in the public sector, private sector, everybody wants progress for Africa. And on that, I salute all of you. The experience of meeting these inspirational young leaders has been a profound one, and indeed a reminder to all of us that no limitation is too great for us to fulfill purpose and impact the lives of many. Next week on the program, it is our privilege to introduce you to Kunle Adewale, a former school teacher who left his job to establish and introduce a new form of therapy known as art therapy to medical institutions across Nigeria. Please join us for the astonishing story of this young African leader. My name is Ajuri Ngelale. Until next time, lead where you are, and followers will find you.